The night he never came home began like all the soft evenings of early autumn in our town. The sky was a faded blue, the color of worn denim. The trees along Maple Street were already rusting at the edges. A breeze moved the porch swing in a slow, hollow creak, the sound that always made me think of old stories and long marriages and the quiet patience I thought I'd earn if I was brave enough to keep choosing love. He texted at 6:40. "Closing late," he wrote, the words marching across the screen with no emoji, no apology, no little heart. "Be home by 9. I sent a thumbs up and a picture of the soup simmering on the stove. He said he'd been craving tomato soup and grilled cheese all week, like a kid. I had the pan already buttered, the bread lined up in pairs on the counter, the good cheddar sweating on the cutting board. I turned the porch light on at 7. It was instinct. His car would turn the corner and the light would catch the windshield. He'd see the square of gold on the fence and know he was almost to me. At 8:30 I texted, "Safe? Then, need gas?" Then, because we had said we would never keep score about who reached first, "Call when you get in the car." He didn't reply. The soup grew a skin. I stirred it. I sent a photo of the orange surface with the caption, "Yours." I added a heart. I told myself he was ringing up a last-minute sale at the hardware store, carrying a ladder to someone's truck, breaking a bill. The town was full of people who would keep him a minute. He was kind in the way that made time leak through his fingers. At 9:15 I called. A voice I didn't know answered. It was a woman. She said hello, then, "Hold on." And the wind made a sound through the phone like a mouth trying to form a word and failing. She came back. She said she'd found the phone on the sidewalk outside the strip mall and kept it because she figured someone would call. She said there was no one around when she'd found it. Just the phone, face down, and a tipped-over cup of coffee. She said she'd left the phone at the nail salon because she had to get home to her kids. I kept my voice steady. I said, "Thank you." I wrote down the number. I found my keys, my purse, my shoes. I turned off the soup and left the grilled cheese pan with its square of butter still solid and cold. The porch light stayed on because I forgot to turn it off. It shone into the street like a pinned idea. The nail salon was closed, but the woman had left a note for me with the number I'd called written in red marker and a little heart next to it. "Phone him back with Lisa," the note said. "Knock on side door." I knocked and waited, and in a minute the door opened and a woman in a smock with glitter ground into it like stars stepped out and handed me his phone. Her hair smelled like acetone and jasmine. "I hope he's okay," she said. Her eyes were sincere and sorry in a way that made the streetlights look closer. I said I hoped so too. I pressed the phone to my chest before I went back to my car, like I was warming it. The phone had a hairline crack running from the top right to the bottom left. A text preview pulsed on the lock screen from me to him. "Safe?" He hadn't seen it. There were smudges on the glass, as if it had skidded across concrete. I unlocked it with the code I knew without thinking, and the home screen lit up. A photo of us at the county fair last summer, my cheek against his shoulder, a paper sun setting behind us in the painted booth. In the picture, he looked like himself. Careless, warm, as if he couldn't imagine a night like this one. I called him while sitting in my car, even though the phone I was holding was his. The call went to voicemail. His recorded voice said his name and then my name as the person to contact if it was urgent. I hung up and sat with my hands on the steering wheel. A moth batted itself against the windshield. I switched on the wipers to shoo it away, then realized how foolish that was. The strip mall was a shallow U of stores with a dry cleaner on one end and a liquor store on the other. Between them, the nail salon, the sandwich place with the chalkboard out front, The hardware store with the bell on the door and the shelves that never changed unless you asked for something and he ordered it for you by hand. I walked the path between the stores, looking for anything that would explain a phone on the ground and a tipped coffee cup. There was nothing but gum wrappers and a leaf that had landed face up with a little puddle in its center, holding a kind of private sky. The hardware store was dark. I touched the glass and saw my face briefly, a pale oval. I pictured him inside, counting cash, straightening pegs, being careful the way he was taught to be careful. His father had shown him how to close a register and a store and a conversation. His father had died in winter, and after that, the routine of closing up felt like reverence. I knew the private keys and the private codes, but I didn't use them. I waited for a reason to force my way into his space. At 10, I called the hospital, then the police station, then the hospital again. They had no one matching his name. The nurse on the late shift said to try again at midnight. Sometimes incident reports took time to move through the system, she said. Her voice was gentle and professional. She sounded like someone you could tell a secret to. I thanked her and hung up. I drove home on the long way. I passed the river, which was a dark seam under the bridge. I passed the high school, where a banner hung across the front steps announcing the fall play. I had seen the title on the banner when I was with him last Saturday, and he had said he would rather take me to dinner in the city than sit on a hard chair. He had a way of promising the city as if it was a spare room in his mind where he could take me at a moment's notice. At home, the porch light made a square of brightness on the walkway. I stepped into it as if it were a promise. I unlocked the door and went inside, and the house greeted me with its comfortable mess. The soup pot on the stove, the folded laundry on the armchair, one of his sweatshirts on the back of a chair in the kitchen, sleeves tied in a knot. I held the fabric to my face and smelled the detergent. It hit me like a small grief that was somehow worse than the big one. At midnight, I called again, no one matching his name. At 1 a.m, the doorbell rang. It was not him. It was a woman I had seen once at the farmer's market, standing behind a table of honey jars. She was tall with hair the color of coffee grounds. She was holding a paper bag with my name written on it. "I'm sorry," she said when I opened the door. "I shouldn't be here this late." I looked at the bag as if it had teeth. "What is this?" "Something he left in my car," she said. "Earlier. I only realized after I drove home." "He left something in your car?" Her mouth made a shape like a wound. "He didn't come home," she said. "I wondered if he came here." The bag was light. Inside was a book of road maps, the old kind with pages that folded like origami. There was also a ring of keys I didn't recognize and a stick of gum. A note had been torn from a receipt and folded into a square. I unfolded it. The handwriting was his. "Back soon," it said. "Don't wait up." My throat closed. The words were the opposite of him. He was the most predictable person I knew. He always told me when he would be an hour late or 15 minutes early. He always told me when he bought milk or forgot to pick up the dry cleaning. The only time he said back soon was when he was running to the corner for a newspaper on Sunday. "Who are you?" I asked. She held my gaze, sure of herself in a way that scratched at me. "I'm Nora," she said. "I know him from the co-op. We talk about the school garden and who will fix the shed. That is all." She took a breath and forced herself to add, "I saw him tonight. He was at the strip mall. He asked if I could drive him to the old train yard because his car wouldn't start. He said he had to pick up something. He said it would take 5 minutes. He left his bag in the back seat and never came back." I wanted to ask why he hadn't called me if his car wouldn't start, why he had asked a woman from the co-op, why he had written that note in a stranger's bag. Instead, I heard myself say, "You shouldn't have come here." "I know." She lifted her hands, palms open, a gesture of peace that didn't feel like peace. But I thought maybe you were looking for him too. The way she said it made me remember how the world looks from the outside when you are the one who doesn't know. Your face is a question asked to anyone who passes. "Show me," I said. "The train yard." She hesitated. "It's late." "I know," I said. "I can't sleep." The train yard at night was a place for ghosts. The tracks were a lattice of metal that caught moonlight and sent it off in narrow lines. The abandoned cars were enormous and wrong-sized, like furniture in a dream. The word Bravo was spray-painted on the side of a freight box in blue letters. A ladder leaned against a fence and went nowhere. The yard smelled like rust and damp leaves. The only sound was a single cricket, so loud it felt mechanical. "Here," Nora said, pointing at a patch of dirt near a low wall. "He told me he would meet someone here. He said it was a Craigslist sale that ran late. He said it was fine." "What was he buying?" "A drill press," she said quickly. He showed me a screenshot of the listing. He had talked about wanting a drill press the way other men talk about boats. Showed me videos, asked for it for his birthday, and then said he would rather take a weekend at the lake with me than a machine we had no room for. He had a little bench in the garage that he called a shop. He stood there in the evenings with music low on his phone and worked through problems by sanding and fastening. We searched, as if two women with a phone flashlight could unclasp the dark. We looked under the platform, behind the rusted plow. We called his name, and the name turned into something else as it left my mouth. A half-sung plea. A child's mistake. A man with a dog finally came by and told us the yard was private property. He held his flashlight in a stab of light and asked what we had lost. "A person," I said. He nodded like that was a common thing, which it probably was. He left, and the night felt larger. Nora's breath looked silver for a moment in the air. "Maybe he got a ride," she said. "Maybe he forgot his phone." He didn't forget things. That was my job. He remembered both our dentist appointments and his nephew's soccer schedule. He remembered the serial numbers on our appliances. He remembered my father's middle name. "Thank you for taking me here," I said. It was both the right and the wrong thing to say. She nodded and put her hands in her coat pockets. At 3 a.m, after she had dropped me at my house, the porch light was still on. The soup in the pot was cold. I poured it into containers, as if preparing for a future I didn't believe in. The refrigerator hummed. My hands moved like they belonged to someone else who lived here and trusted the morning. He did not come home that night. The next day, I called everyone who would not be alarmed by being called at 8 a.m. His mother, his sister, his best friend from middle school who now lived 2 towns over. I called the hardware store and spoke to the teenage clerk on the opening shift. "He never came back after dinner," the boy said. "He told me to take the deposit. He said he would stop by later to do inventory. He seemed fine." I went down to the station and filled out a report. The officer asked me to describe his clothes. I said he had on his store shirt, the gray one with his name stitched above the pocket, and jeans he'd had patched where the pocket ripped. I said he wore the belt with the too big buckle that he had won at a county fair when he was a kid, throwing rings. I said he was not a runner. He was not a drinker. He was steady. The officer looked at me in the patient way of someone who had heard every claim of steadiness and every refusal to read the signs. He wrote things down in block letters that made me feel like my life was being cataloged in a dry, orderly way I could not stand. After I left the station, I drove to the strip mall again. I knelt on the concrete and touched the place where the coffee had spilled. The stain had faded. I walked behind the stores and found a dumpster with a broken lid. Inside was the coffee cup. I lifted it out and held it like an answered prayer because it was ours, with the logo of the diner across town where he stopped some mornings, and the way he folded the lid back to sip without removing it, like he was always prepared to move. I looked around as if he might be near, as if he might step out from behind the dumpster with a laugh and throw his hands up and say, "Okay, okay," and tell me a story that made me angry and relieved at once. He was good at that. He could take my anger like a coat and hang it up. No one came out. The air was clear and thin. A car drove by with music audible through the open window. A woman parallel parked badly, straightened, and did it again until she was lined up, and in the ordinary ballet of it, I felt a heat in my eyes. I tried to go to work. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop and stared at the cursor blink, a steady heartbeat that mocked my own. I closed it and stood and realized I did not want to move through a day that did not contain him. I wanted to sit in the doorway of the life we shared and refuse to let it become another room. That afternoon, the police called to say a patrol had found his car by the train yard. It was locked. The keys were gone. There was no sign of a struggle. This is how they put it, no sign of a struggle. As if the struggle is always visible, as if it isn't mostly inside the person who leaves. They asked if I could come down to confirm it was his car. I walked through the yard with the same officer, dodging puddles, until we came to the blue Civic with the dented bumper and the bumper sticker that said, "I brake for garage sales." It was ours. I touched the hood and it was cool. Inside, on the passenger seat, was a paper bag from the sandwich place, folded and empty. The glove box was open. The manual lay face down. A pen rested inside the spiral like a thin bone. The officer said they would hold the car for a day, then release it to me. I said, "Okay." He looked at me for a long time as if I were a puzzle with one too many corners. "Sometimes people leave," he said. "Not him. Sometimes people do things out of character when they are in trouble." "What trouble?" He shrugged. It was a small movement that changed nothing and everything. I drove home in a fog. Nora called while I was on the river road and said, "Any news?" I said no. She said she was sorry. I could hear a kettle in the background and the clatter of a spoon on a mug. The intimacy of those sounds made me angrier than I had been since the night before. It was the kind of anger that keeps its hands behind its back. "When you dropped him off," I said. "What did he say?" "He said thank you," she said. "He said he owed me one." "Owed you one." "It's a figure of speech." "He's a literal person?" Silence. Then, "He said I shouldn't tell anyone," she added quietly, "that he didn't want to worry you." Heat rose up my neck. "He told you not to tell me." "It was a moment," she said. "He was embarrassed about the car. He gets stubborn. You know that." I did. He would rather walk home pushing a bicycle with a flat than call me to pick him up. He would rather have a scar than a bandage. I said thank you and hung up before the anger found a person to live in. The second night, I turned the porch light on again, because not turning it on felt like a choice I couldn't survive. The bulb hummed. Moths threw themselves into the gold and fell away and returned. The swing creaked on its own rhythm. I made the grilled cheese and ate it at the counter with the quiet that comes when your mind gives up on fever and slides into something duller. I slept on the couch, and every sound the house made woke me. Pipes settling. A car farther down the street, rain starting and stopping like breath. On Sunday, his sister came with her 2 kids. The kids ran around the house and touched everything with small hands that didn't recognize the way grief turns rooms into museums. His sister made a pot of coffee and wiped the counter with the sponge that had been sitting there since Friday. She spoke in the voice you use to speak around a broken thing. The kids climbed onto the couch and asked where their uncle was. Then they asked if he had died. They had been to a funeral. They knew that one answer for absence. I said no. Their faces did not change with relief. They were already on to something else. After they left, I found myself in the garage, standing in front of his bench, looking at the wood shavings organized into a tidy drift on the floor. His tools were hung on nails with careful spacing, their shapes memorized by the wall. The space smelled like cedar and oil. On the bench, under a rag, was a half-finished birdhouse. He had been making it for the school garden, he said. The roof was cut, but not attached. The doorway was a circle that still held its chalk mark in a rough ring. I put the roof where it would go and held it there. It sat as if it belonged, which was either a comfort or the opposite. The police called again. They had pulled footage from a camera at a convenience store near the train yard. The footage showed him walking across the lot at 8:57. He looked down at his phone. He lifted a hand like he was about to wave at someone and then didn't. The footage did not show who he might have been looking at or toward. It did not show where he went. It showed him and then air. I stared at the screenshot they emailed me until the pixels blurred and then sharpened again. I went to the convenience store and bought a cup of coffee to stand in the spot where he had stood with a cup of coffee. I asked the cashier if he remembered a man in a gray shirt with his name stitched on it. The cashier said maybe. "People are mostly coffee and cigarettes to me," he said. I nodded as if that was a kind of wisdom. That night, I dreamed he was walking toward me across a field of dry grass. The sky was gray in a way that meant snow in a month. He held something in his hand that looked like a ring of keys and a bit of light. When he got close, I saw it was a ring of keys and a bit of light. I said, "You left." And he said, "I know." His mouth was soft. He told me something I couldn't hold on to, like water I could feel but not keep. He set the keys in my palm and closed my fingers over them. When I woke, my fist was tight and empty. On Monday, a letter arrived. It had no return address. The stamp was one of those winter birds that made the envelope look festive. My name was written in his handwriting. The O in my first name had the tiniest tail. He made it that way without thinking. Inside, one sheet of lined paper torn from a small notebook. The writing was fast but neat. It said, "I can't come home tonight or tomorrow. I have to fix something I broke a long time ago. Don't look for me. It will embarrass us both. I am sorry. Keep the porch light on if you want. Love, S." There was no explanation. No place name. The postmark was from 2 towns over, the place with the feed store and the diner with the pancakes that tasted like Sunday. If he had mailed the letter Friday night, it should have come Saturday, maybe Sunday, if the system had been slow. It arrived Monday like a delayed decision. I walked the letter to the station. The officer read it and made a face like he was trying not to make a face. "Do you recognize the writing?" "Yes." "So he wrote it?" "Yes." "Then he's alive?" "Yes." He handed it back with fingertips that barely touched it. "People leave," he said again, softer this time, like the words had worn a groove. I went home and lay the letter on the table. I put a glass on top of it to flatten where the envelope had wrinkled it. I read it until the words lost their meaning and became shapes. Fix, broke, embarrass, love. I thought about what he might have broken. In our house, we had a chip in a bowl we both lied about making. We had a sticky doorknob. We had not spoken aloud the way we were tired. Maybe he meant before me. Maybe he meant something inherited, some long crack in his family that he had to measure and fill with the right compound and clamp until the glue cured. I called his mother. She said, "That boy," and then stopped so she wouldn't cry. I called his sister. She said, "He wouldn't." I called his best friend, who said nothing for so long I thought the line had gone dead. Then he said, "He's stubborn." I said, "That's not a diagnosis?" He said, "No." At dusk, I turned on the porch light and made pasta because it was the only thing I could make without thinking. The glow through the curtains made the room feel like a photograph of a feeling I used to have. I ate standing at the counter. I slept in our bed on his side and woke on mine. Days can hold an absence like a container. They do it by being ordinary. I went to the store and bought milk and a box of cereal he liked even though I hate it. I paid the phone bill. I put his car keys on the hook even though I still hadn't gotten the car back. I folded laundry. I ordered a replacement bulb for the front hall. People called and asked if there was news. I said no. They said they were thinking of me. I thanked them because it gave them something to do. Nora sent a text. "I am worried too," she wrote. I didn't reply. She sent a photo of the school garden where the sunflowers had bent under their heavy heads. The caption said, "The kids planted these." I put my phone face down on the table and sat looking at it as if it might grow a mouth and tell me what to do. On Thursday, a postcard arrived from a place on the coast we had visited once, a gray beach with driftwood laid like bones. The postcard had a picture of the lighthouse where we had kissed in a wind so strong it stole our breath and gave it back. In the space for the message he had written, in the same tired, careful hand, "Work in progress. Don't come." He had tried to be gentle with the letters. The K in work looked like it wanted to put a hand on my shoulder. I carried the postcard around the house until I realized I was holding it like a talisman. I put it in the drawer with the warranty papers and the spare rubber feet for the cutting board, as if it belonged to the same category of necessary small things. That evening, I went to the train yard without telling anyone. I parked his car where the officers had found it because the tow lot had released it to me with a form I signed without fully reading. I sat in the driver's seat, hands at 10 and 2, and watched the sky deepen. A train slid by on the far track, a string of rectangles with yellow windows where no one I could see sat. The whistle sounded once like a single open question. I got out and walked the long line of the fence and found a place where the wire had been cut and mended. Near the ground, something glinted, a washer or a coin. I crouched and nudged leaves with my fingers. A thin chain lay half buried, the cheap kind you buy at a dollar store. It was not his. He didn't wear jewelry. Still, I lifted it free and put it in my pocket like a promise made by a stranger. On the way home, I saw him. At least I saw a man with his shoulders and the way he walked, a purposeful head-down gait like every step had been earned with effort. He was on the opposite sidewalk near the diner. He wore a gray shirt. He had a bag over his shoulder. I pulled into a lot without looking and ran across the street, calling his name. The man turned. It was not him. The face was wrong in small ways that mattered. The eyes were too light. The mouth was chapped. He had a scar at the edge of his hairline I didn't know. He flinched at my urgency and then smiled a confused, friendly smile. "Sorry," he said, and the voice was not the one that found me in the dark. I stood on the sidewalk feeling foolish, then felt worse because the relief I had rehearsed turned to embarrassment in an instant. The man put a hand in the air in apology and walked on. I went back to the car and pressed my forehead to the steering wheel. I drove home slower than I had left. I parked, turned on the porch light, and sat on the steps. The swing moved in the wind without me. An hour passed. Then another. At 10, footsteps on the walk. I stood so quickly the blood rose to my head in a wash. He came into the square of light, thinner than last week and older, the corners of his eyes holding new lines like map symbols. He said my name as if it were the answer to a question he had been trying to solve. I held the railing because the ground felt like the ocean for a second. "Did you think sending a letter would make it less cruel?" I thought it would make it clear, he said. I thought if you hated me without me there, it would hurt you less. There are answers you can give that don't cost anything. There are answers that are a kind of tax. I chose the one that made us even. It hurt, I said. It still does. He nodded as if I had asked him to agree with the weather. I called the bank today, he said. I told them everything. I asked what happens to a person who has done what I did. They said some of it could be arranged in a plan. They said some of it would be messy. I came back to tell you. I came back because I couldn't ask you to keep the light on another night and not come into it. I came back because I kept seeing your face where it should be and then it wasn't. He looked at me for a long time. It was not a stare, not a demand. It was a waiting. He had always been patient in small ways. He could sit with a piece of wood and a sandpaper block for an hour and make a corner that looked like a decision. He had not been patient with this. He had been a child who hid his broken toy and then cried when the missing thing made the room wrong. Come inside, I said finally. The words surprised me. I had meant to say, go away. I had meant to say, sleep in your car and learn something. I had meant to say, I am not your house. He picked up the bag and came up the steps like a person walking into church because he is out of choices. I stepped aside and let him pass. In the kitchen, he stopped and looked at the pot and the pan and the folded towels. He put his bag down and sat at the table with his hands on his knees. I stood with my back against the counter. We were actors who had not learned their lines, so we let the stage tell us what to do. I will make the soup, I said. It is better on the second day. I remember, he said. I ladled the soup into a pot and set it on the stove. I turned the knob and the flame caught with its small, cheerful sound. I made the grilled cheese with the bread that was a little stale now. The butter softened. The smell filled the room with something that felt like an old story you can't tell without leaving half of it out. I put the plate in front of him. He looked at it as if it were a gift and a question. We ate without talking. The soup was, in fact, better. The sandwich made the exact sound when he bit it that told me he was human and alive and hungry. He finished and put the plate in the sink and washed it without being asked. He dried it with the towel that lives on the oven handle and put it on the rack. The ordinary way he did this made my eyes sting again. When the dishes were done, we sat at the table with our hands flat on the wood, as if we were offering proof of ourselves. I am going to pay what I owe, he said. I am going to tell people what I did. I am going to let them be angry and disappointed. I am going to keep my job if they let me, or sweep floors if they don't. I am going to ask you to let me live in the spare room until you can believe me or decide you can't. Why the spare room? I asked, hearing my own voice with a stranger's calm. Because I cannot ask you to share a bed with a person who ran away, he said, because you deserve a door to close. I looked at the door to the hall, at the seam where light seeped under it from the porch. I thought of the birdhouse in the garage, the roof leaning against the body like a promise the builder had loosened his hand from. I thought of the train yard, the way the tracks meet and leave and meet again, because that is what they are designed to do. You can sleep in the spare room, I said. For now. He nodded and stood with the careful gratitude of a person handed a fragile object to carry. He picked up his bag. At the doorway, he stopped. The night I never came home, he said, and his voice caught for the first time. I thought I had saved you something by not making you watch me fall apart. I see that I took something instead. What did you take? The version of us where I didn't lie. He said, the version where you waited because I asked you to wait, not because I disappeared. We stood there with that between us. The porch light hummed. A moth traced a figure 8 near the screen as if caught in a pattern it couldn't change. He went down the hall. I heard the spare room door open and shut, and the soft sound of a bag left on the floor, and the sigh a person makes when they lower themselves onto a bed that will either hold them or won't. I turned off the kitchen light. I turned off the porch light too, for the first time in days, and the sudden dark at the window felt like the beginning of something I could not name yet. I stood by the sink until my eyes adjusted. The room took shape again. The chairs were chairs. The table was a table. The pot on the stove held a little more soup for tomorrow. I went down the hall and stood outside the spare room door, opened the door, and listened for his breath, the way you listen for rain when the weatherman says it won't come. I put my hand on the wood and then took it away. In our bedroom, I slid under the sheet and lay on my side with my knees drawn up. The ceiling was a dark map. I thought of all the versions of us that had nothing to do with this night and everything to do with it. The ones where we bought the drill press and made strange wooden gifts for people at Christmas. The ones where we went to the city and had dinner near the river. The ones where I left and did not turn back and learned what kind of person I am when I don't hold someone else's story up to the light. I slept. In the morning, he made coffee and left a cup outside my door. He did not knock. He sat on the porch with the newspaper as if he lived here and had always lived here and would be content to live here alone if that was what the world decided. The sun made a small lake in the yard where the dew lay heavy. The trees looked like they were thinking about letting go. I took the cup and went out. I sat in the other chair. We did not touch. He told me the numbers. I told him the parts of the story I had learned trying to find him. He listened. He did not interrupt. He did not say that I should not have done what I did because he knew what it would sound like. When we finished, we did not feel better. We felt true. Days passed. The porch light stayed off at night because we slept at reasonable hours like people who had moved through a storm and were, for now, on the quiet side of it. He went to the bank. He met with the man who had loaned him money and offered the car as a start. He told his mother. He told the store manager. He stood in front of people he loved and said the thing that would make them angry and let them be angry and stood there while the anger drained away or didn't. I kept the letter in the drawer. I kept the postcard. I kept the cheap chain from the yard in a small dish by the sink where we throw screws and paper clips and the round pin that came off my coat. I looked at it sometimes as if it might reveal the shape of someone else's day. After 2 weeks, he asked if he could fix the birdhouse. I said yes. He took it to the bench and set the roof on straight and measured and clamped and drilled pilot holes so the wood wouldn't split. He worked with a calm that had nothing to prove. When he was done, he brought it in and set it on the table. It looked like a small house where a thing with a heart could live. We took it to the school garden. Nora was there with a group of kids and a crate of tiny rakes. She lifted a hand in a careful hello. He lifted one back. We set the birdhouse on a post near the sunflowers that had bent even further under their own insisting heads. A child asked if birds would move in right away. He said they would come when they were ready. He said it without looking at me, and I let the words land where they would. That night, after dinner, I turned on the porch light. Not because he had asked or because he was late, but because I liked the way it looked on the fence. He came and stood beside me. We watched the moths write their invisible letters in the air. The swing moved in its slow, old rhythm. The porch boards were warm from the day. He touched my hand with 2 fingers on the back where the bone shows. A touch that asked nothing. A touch that said he was here. I let my hand stay. We stood in the small gold circle the light made, and for a little while the night was only a night, and not a story we would always have to tell.